Well, good afternoon and good morning, everybody, depending on where you're from. Welcome to the All Hands on Deck call. We are excited to have you here. My name is Stacy Reed. I'm the Director of Deck Network Development for National DEC. And with me, I also have Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie Jensen. I am our Alliance Communication, Training, and Support Coordinator. And Stacy and I will both be monitoring the chat today and helping facilitate questions while Patty presents. So just wanted to let you know you're welcome to private chat us if you have any questions, or just put it in the general chat for everyone.
Perfect. So today the topic is going to be the importance of recovery, and then how kind of that mixes in with DEC efforts that you may be involved with as well. So with that being said, welcome Patty McCarthy from Faces and Voices of Recovery. We are super excited to have you, and we will let you take it away.
Great. Thank you very much. I am just looking at my screens here. Okay. Zoom world we're in. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm super excited to tell you a little bit about myself and about what I do at Faces and Voices of Recovery, sort of the state of the state in the recovery advocacy movement here in the United States. So just want to start out by saying that I am a woman in long-term recovery. And for me, that means I haven't used alcohol or drugs in over 32 years. Next week will be 33 years. So super excited and grateful. If it wasn't for my recovery, I certainly wouldn't be here today, but I also wouldn't be a mom and a grandma and a taxpayer and a voter and all those good things. So I come from my work has been across the spectrum of prevention, treatment, and recovery. I started out, well, early on, I was worked in a treatment center doing intakes and client overnights and things, overnight support. And then I got into the prevention work. So I started as a prevention consultant in the state of Vermont. And I did that for a few years. So working in state government, I understand a lot about the programming and the support that the role that the state has in supporting recovery. And at that time, I was actually first exposed to DEC, which I don't even know if it was formally the National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children. I think it was more about we hadn't experienced kind of the meth epidemic in Vermont or in New England, but they were sending prevention consultants to a lot of trainings to identify homes or families where there was were exposed to substances. So I had a little bit of background in that, but then I really found my passion once I started working in a nonprofit in Vermont for 10 years. I was the director of Friends of Recovery Vermont, which is a national, statewide advocacy and education organization. And I found myself very drawn to like the nature of community building and community capacity building, really looking at the role of people with lived experience like myself and how to engage in decision making and be on advisory councils and committees. So I loved that job. We trained people in recovery coaching, we trained people in speakers bureau, and I did a lot of work at the State House, working with policymakers, legislators, and chaired the governor's advisory council on alcohol and drug programs. So I was fortunate at that time to have been invited to join the board of directors for Faces and Voices of Recovery in Washington, DC. And I had a brief stint of running the Brass Tacks, a SAMHSA training and technical assistance center before becoming the CEO here at Faces and Voices of Recovery. So that's kind of how I got here. I know, I have children, I have grandchildren, I've been a foster parent, I've been involved with supporting children. So it's a real passion for me. And I'm also very fortunate to just have recently joined the board of directors for National DEC. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to share a little bit about the history of Faces and Voices of Recovery, how we evolved, and what are the issues that we work on, and what are the services that we provide. And really just to explain how this works in communities across the country. because we're really a model for how to do this in local levels. So it's a similar kind of model that National DEC has, where we build the capacity of local communities and organizations. So our mission, as you see here, is to change the way addiction and recovery are understood and embraced. And we do that through advocacy, education, and leadership. So really developing leaders, helping people find their role in being part of the solution. Also in educating our leaders in federal government and in Congress and on the state level as well. So we do our vision is that we will have a world where the diverse voices of individuals and families affected by addiction are embraced and connected in communities free from discrimination and injustice. So we do have like our social justice lens for what we come to this movement from. But that really started as a result of a number of things. Leading up to how we evolved was really about the 1980s, 1990s, when most of what we see is the criminalization of addiction. And the stigma that millions of people live with, that when they're struggling with problems with substance use. A lot of what we do is focus as trainings on stigma, and essentially the name of our organization is about fighting stigma, because it's putting a face and a voice on recovery. And I've heard, and you've probably heard, you can't hate close up. You got to know the people and know their stories. And so that's why we focus on real people and real stories. But, back in 1991, Senator Harold Hughes, who was a person in recovery in Congress, was able to create this Society for Americans in Recovery, SOAR. And that was really the first time on the national level that anyone even knew or thought about putting a face and a voice on recovery. They held this Operation Understanding in Congress, where people like Dick Van Dyke and others, Bill Wilson from AA, founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, actually went to Capitol Hill for this Operation Understanding. And there's video of this. So people, well-known people, there's astronauts, there's politicians, there's plenty of people, but they were gathering people to put a face and a voice on recovery. And then other initiatives came after that, Stepping Stones Accords and the National Forum and the Alliance Project. And really the Alliance Project is where we were born out of. So in 2001, which is just over 20 years ago, and this just last month, we celebrated our 21st year by having a summit in St. Paul, Minnesota. It was supposed to be in 2021 for the 20-year anniversary, but due to COVID, we pushed it back a year. But really that summit back in 2001 was a couple hundred people working in the treatment, and there were family advocates, there were people in recovery, and they came together and they convened this summit, but really for the purpose of identifying key organizing points. And the organizing points that they came up with out of that were really to bring visibility to the fact that there are millions of people in recovery, that it's not only possible, but it's probable with the right supports. And there's a lot of more research now, 20 years later, that demonstrates what kind of supports are needed for people to find their way to long-term recovery. So we really focus on this advocacy piece of educating folks and unifying our voices. And Bill White, who's a well-known author and recovery advocate, he wrote Slaying the Dragon, the history of addiction treatment in America. And another book based on our summit really was called Let's Go Make Some History. But what he was saying was, at this summit, he said, many of us carried the message of hope on a one-to-one basis. And what he meant by that was we were doing it, but we were anonymous. we were just helping each other in behind the scenes because we didn't think it was okay to talk publicly about recovery. But when this summit happened, it really created a movement that called upon us to carry the message of hope to whole communities and the whole culture. And it's time we step forward to shape this history with our stories, our time, and our talents. Meaning that there's so much power in numbers. And just like any other social justice movement, the civil rights movement, the gay marriage movement, other movements like gun rights and there's plenty of movements, but they needed, but they were driven by people with that personal lived experience of those issues. So something important to them. And they all came with their own talents and, from lawyers to teachers to everybody bringing that coming together. So we really, so that's kind of a history of where we started. Since then, we've had a lot of achievements, organizing goal achievements, some wins, not only in Congress, but just I think helping to make sure that people know, like the general public knows what recovery is, and to help break down that stigma. And believe me, we have a long way to go. I totally understand that, like, stigma is still the #1 reason why people don't access treatment. They're afraid of what their family members, their employers, anybody will know if they go. And so if they get asked for help, and that's really unfortunate, because it's really the #1 reason why people aren't getting help they need today. So we created a Recovery Bill of Rights in 2008, and it really talked about, we have the right to appropriate treatment. We have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. So there's a lot of other pieces to that Recovery Bill of Rights. We started an online action center so people can get involved, like with our National Call-In Day for the Mental Health Equity and Addiction Parity Act, which we were very instrumental in 2008 in getting that passed. Basically rang the phones off the hook in Congress that day for a National Call-In Day, and really convinced lawmakers by telling our stories about why we needed equal access to substance use disorder or mental health treatment services at the same level that our insurance covers our medical conditions. So that was a big win and a big rallying point for us back in 2008. Since then, we've also had some other successes. There was the one and only really significant grant program out of the federal government for recovery support services is Recovery Community Services Program. They're now more recently, there's the Building Communities of Recovery grant program. But for both of those, we have had to go rally about keeping them, because there's been threats over the different administrations of defunding those, like not supporting recovery. But it wouldn't, if it wasn't for that RCSP program back in 1998, a lot of what I'm talking about would never have happened. But it really was with the support of the federal government that they wanted to see the people come together and have do leadership development, advocacy, grow these organizations, and that happened from that funding. We also work really hard every year since 2008 when we launched Recovery Voices Count, which is really to give the communities tools like toolkits on how to set up a voter registration table, how to educate your voters. This is all nonpartisan. So we do things in a way that just it's about educating and empowering civic engagement. And so we had a presidential town hall meeting in New Hampshire, which was really successful. And which I love about this part, we fought to repeal the ban on financial aid to students with drug convictions. I mean, there's nothing worse than being a person in recovery after 4, 5, 10 years, wanting to go back to school, and really make a difference. But they've done everything they needed to do. They're in their great place in their life. to be denied access to financial aid because of a past history. It's another discriminatory practice that we work to repeal. Now it is partially repealed. It means that on the free application for federal student aid, there is still a question on there, but it says, when did you get convicted of a drug crime while you were receiving financial aid? It doesn't ask you about before you were receiving financial aid, which is good. So it helps open the door for more people who have, who want to go back to school and get their education. And a lot of the reason why a lot of us now in this work are now able to go back to school and do what we love and able to be help in this work. So every year in September, we organize, so we took the coordination role of National Recovery Month from SAMHSA a couple of years ago. So our organization is now coordinating National Recovery Month. So we manage that website and create all the materials. So it's a great way to bring people together for rallies or for events, or just to find out what the theme is for the year and how to really use those tools, like for a op-ed or a proclamation in your community, your mayor. You can go there, you can get those tools that will help to bring people together to put a face and a voice in recovery. And it's certainly not just people in recovery. And let me clarify that the recovery community is people in recovery, our family members, our friends, and our allies. So I would hope that everyone here today fits into that in some way, that you are an ally, and then in the work that you do to people in and seeking recovery, especially, the youngest people who are the greatest winners. They're the biggest winners when people get recovery, right? It's the children. When a family finds recovery, the children get the biggest benefit. So we consider the recovery community as a broad definition. But we have a campaign called Our Stories Have Power, which is really about messaging around recovery. We do a lot of that training and different events, the science of addiction and recovery, lots of different trainings. I'll talk more about that shortly. But one of the key things that we did was create an association across the United States, and it's actually international, but it's called the Association of Recovery Community Organizations. And these are small grassroots nonprofit organizations that are led and run by the recovery community. And they're doing one of three things: advocacy, public awareness, like trainings and education or outreach, or peer recovery support services. And many of them operate like recovery community centers. So they have spaces where people experiencing substance use disorder, if they're in recovery, they come together, they meet with a recovery coach. That's what recovery community organizations are. And so now we have about 175 affiliates across the country. And there's other countries that have modeled what we do. There's Faces and Voices of Recovery, United Kingdom, South Africa, Brazil, Canada. So this is a model, just like the DEC model, of community building, coalition building, that has been carried out in other parts of the world, given the success that we've had at Faces and Voices of Recovery. So now today, we are a thriving organization. I've been working here for the past eight years, but our board of directors, our leadership is primarily people in recovery. And we've had experienced rapid growth. So like I said, when I started here, there were 2 of us, and now we just hired our 28th person. So we're completely around the country, and we have a 100% remote workplace. We do have an office in DC, but it's more of a storage room because we're not there very much. And it is nice to have a place to go when we are in DC for events and meetings. But a lot of our focus has been on inclusion, diversity focus, bringing in diverse voices, but also lifting up people and really infusing our diversity throughout our organization. But certainly the nothing about us without us applies here. You know, like I said earlier, we really try to make sure that when there's opportunities to have people with lived experience in community coalitions or in national council, advisory councils or things like that, that we help to promote that. And we do that, you know, certainly within our own organization by giving an opportunity for very diverse people to come in and be part of our staff. One of the core elements, core guiding principles of recovery is to support all pathways of recovery. So what most people are familiar with is 12-step based recovery, like, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous or others, but there are a million other ways for people to find recovery, and it's unique to the individual. So what works for some people doesn't work for others. And that there's been this need over the past 20 years that I've been involved. I've seen a lot of different types of groups started, like Celebrate Recovery, which is a faith-based group, Recovery Dharma, Smart Recovery. There's also physical fitness-based recovery programs like the Phoenix, which does gyms and outdoor activities, hiking and things like that. There's just a whole lot of different groups and pathways. But when we talk about pathways, it's not just a group model. It could be, you know, medication assisted recovery, where, you know, so that's a pathway. And so there's a lot of different, so that's one of the core things that we promote. The bottom line is that is the person well or becoming well, and whatever works for them it's very self-directed, and it's that's a core guiding principle of recovery as well. So like I said, we've been focusing a lot on justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that's the way we use it within our organization is JDEI. We have accepted or acknowledged, and we have acknowledged our role as an organization in part of the systemic racism that has happened within the recovery movement. And so by doing that, we really were able to just level set and come together with other national organizations and say, this is the completely white-centric movement. We have not lifted up policies or addressed barriers in the community to the people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people of, you know, LGBTQ, lots of, you know, we just have not done a great job of that. So that was very much a collaborative effort with a group of other national organizations. And we formed this North Star document, which is on our website, that has some clear action steps that as a movement, we can do better. And so we've been offering these JDEI, these forums, even in the next one's November 10th in the evening, but it's on our website. What we do is we really we hear from people who are most impacted and break into small groups and have conversations, and it's very powerful. But as an organization in our strategic plan, we've integrated that throughout all of our advocacy and our training initiatives, and have grown quite a bit in the recent years in that area. So I think that's just going to continue to be our focus in policies and in building community coalitions, is to really focus on equity issues. So I have, so one of the things I did want to talk about is the concept of recovery capital. The people that you're working with, in your communities, and your community itself all have recovery capital. So recovery capital is the internal and external assets that we have to help us in our recovery, in our wellness. So for me, when I look at my early recovery, I was I went to treatment 3 times as a teenager, residential treatment. And I had a strong family support. I had a guidance counselor at my high school. I had insurance that was going to pay for my treatment. Those are like assets within my person personally. Plus, I had some education, I had a drive, I had a purpose. So I got the help that I needed, but a lot of people don't have that. And so they start with like negative recovery capital. And our goal is to help look at how to build recovery capital in people. And we actually do that. I'll tell you more about our programs in a minute, but we've been having these recovery capital pop-ups, which is really looking at the community recovery capital. So it's a 1-day event, and it unites the members of the recovery ecosystems. So that means law enforcement, court systems, healthcare providers, treatment providers, prevention, child welfare agencies, bringing everybody together to learn about each other and just kind of like sit together and share successes, identify challenges, and collaborate on next steps. They're oftentimes building new relationships. We see that at each of these that we've done, is people just didn't know about each other, and really moving forward with grassroots advocacy that they come out of it with, I met this, this organization, and we're going to build some relationships, and we're going to work on these things. So what I wanted to do now is to just share it's a 4-minute video that's an overview of one of our recovery capital pop-ups. So, tech and me. So hold on just a minute, and we're going to make sure that this works. Oh, it came up on the wrong screen. Hold on. Share screen. Okay. This is I'll start this one. I think make sure that I selected that you can hear. Yep, you can hear the sound. Okay. And here we go. You'll see it's a fun way to get people together, and this one is in Denver, Colorado.
And that's why we're here today, is because we want to hear your voices. What's going on in Colorado? We are having some roundtable discussions, which are going to be really helpful for, number one, for you guys to identify what's working well, what needs to happen, where do we need to improve, and give you a space to talk with one another, which we just haven't had a whole lot of that lately.
Thanks for coming. It's so good to see all of you, and I'm so happy that you decided to join us today. We are the Authentic Statewide Recovery Community Organization in Colorado. We provide free peer recovery support services to anyone in need, and our goal is for there to never be barriers to people getting support for their recovery.
You see money spent on all sorts of advertising for all sorts of things. Like, when was the last time you saw a billboard for "there's something more"? Like, when did recovery, ever get, marketing for it that said, hey, like, guess what? Your life doesn't have to look like that. It can look like that. When's the last time you saw a billboard driving down I-25 that said that? Like, when was the last time you had anything that, you know, was different than what you've already been living in?
When you say war on drugs, there's an enemy and there's a hero, right? And we're trying to come together as a community to come up with solutions to a problem that's affecting us all. So if we make it a divisive thing, then there has to be someone that has to get punished, right? There has to be someone that has to lose, and someone has to win. So it doesn't make sense for this kind of situation.
Darren pointed out, he's like, we do art shows 3 times a year, and they invite everybody, press, legislation, they invite everybody to show not the bad side of recovery or addiction, but the amazing side. Look at the beauty in recovery. One of the big things is sharing who somebody was or is in lieu of their addiction. So, you know, we're all people. We're not our addiction, and I see that every day in the emergency department.
You know, we talked about momentum. We build it, and we're all guilty of it, but then things happen. We're busy doing, you know, these other things, and we lose sight of this. You know what I mean? So we all together, we need to continue to hold each other accountable, to keep the momentum of stuff like this, to make the change.
We may say it differently, but it all came to the same point. And our priority is to help and educate people better and learn ways to make it sure that it get out to the public. Because I know for myself, I can speak 7 years ago, a lot of this education was not available. And especially being a person, I mean, African-American man on Medicaid, I didn't have it. You know, you only had so many options to go out to get recovered. And it sucked. But today, I have education to allow the rest of African-American men or either indigenous people or people of other races to be able to see that we have ways to help them.
Awareness is a powerful tool. You know, as Patty had mentioned, there are still people who are unaware that 107,000 people died as a direct result of preventable overdose deaths last year. There are still some people who are unaware that the leading cause of death for people who are 18 to 45 is drug overdose. And that's a powerful figure, that people my age are dying more from drug overdose than anything else. And so we need your voice to continue to ensure that funding's available, that recovery always has a place at the table. And there's several ways that we can do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to this slide here and share. There we go. So yeah, we've been doing these now in a number of cities. We'd love to come to your city and host one as well. We were in Sacramento, Charleston, Indianapolis, and we have one coming up in Tampa. I know we have more planned for Indiana and Connecticut. So it's a great way to bring people together from, you know, including the recovery voices at the table, but that, you know, at each of these it's a lot of, you know, it's a great way to convene folks. And I want to, I got to move on because I want to just give you a quick overview of our programs, and then we'll open it up to questions or comments. So again, we do a lot of advocacy, but we also created a recovery data platform, which is actually collecting the results of recovery coaching, peer-to-peer support in across the nation. So it's a software that was developed. It's showing, you know, improvements in quality of life for lots of people that are receiving peer support. So we manage that. We have a National Recovery Institute, which is our training and technical assistance division. As I mentioned, ARCO, the Association of Recovery Community Organizations. I'm sorry, I am I forgot I had some slides on each of these, but So I talked about our advocacy and really helping to equip organizations with advocacy so that they have the tools they need on the local level to advocate with their policymakers. And especially now with the opioid settlement funds, there's a lot of reason to have people with lived experience at the table when they're making decisions on how that money is spent. And then, like I said, we have this recovery data platform, which is HIPAA compliant, but it helps to facilitate connections between the person receiving the services and the person delivering it. So we look at, it has a scheduling for check-in calls and volunteers. And it's we're now in the process of evaluating the results of peer support by using that in a research with the University of Pennsylvania. Our training and technical assistance is led by people with experience, lived experience. We welcome people to come and join us as adjunct faculty. The ARCO is now, like I said, 175 organizations around the country, and there's a map on our website where you could find out where you're located if there's an RCO near you. And those are just our members. There are other RCOs out there, but contact us if you want to figure out how you can connect with a local recovery community organization that's doing that grassroots work in your state. And then we launched CAPRS, which actually is the only certifying body for organizations that are providing peer services. It's primarily offered for recovery community organizations, but we have behavioral health providers that part of their program is to deliver peer support that are also becoming accredited. It's a rigorous process, but it's well worth it to build capacity within the program. And we do a lot of media, so you'll see us on Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media. But we just launched our first episode of a documentary about the real life story of one of our staff people actually, and her journey of recovery. And we have a podcast, which has been very interesting because we had a series of 3 focused on harm reduction and how the intersection of harm reduction and recovery. And so we're doing a lot more work in that area as well. And so if you have any questions or want to reach out to us, there's information there about how to reach us on our website. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. We're always happy to talk about what recovery is, what are the guiding principles, how do you train peer support workers, all of those things that we have some expertise on within our organization. So thanks for listening.
Awesome. Awesome. I love the information. So I have to tell you, Patty, you all are doing a ton of stuff that I wasn't aware of all of it. So I appreciate you coming and sharing that. I do think that there's a lot of connections that folks are hopefully making between recovery efforts and DEC efforts. But let's open it up to questions from you all. I know there were a couple that came in privately through the chat that we'll get to, but do you guys maybe we've got quite a few people on, maybe throw questions into the chat box, and then we will make sure that we get to those. We'll give folks oh, go ahead, Carrie.
I was gonna say, maybe while we're giving people a chance to type some in, one question that we received beforehand, Patty, was how can we bring peer recovery supports into DEC efforts? How do you see those overlapping and combining?
Well, you're interacting with a lot of families, and the families, there is family support specialists that are peer support. Like for example, in Colorado, they have recovery coaches that are in the emergency departments, but they also have a family recovery coach. And so that person, would be the person that would be, if you partner with that organization, you can set up, so, like they said, free peer support. They need to be, the organization itself would need to be supported in some way, but there are trained many peer recovery coaches out there. If you're thinking about starting or integrating them into your program, then there are certainly some lessons learned about making sure that the organization is recovery ready, that we look at the culture of the organization before you just simply, and when you think about a recovery oriented system of care, there's, there's some training around that says there's an additive approach, which means we're an organization, we're going to add peer support. But then there's the transformative approach, or transformational, which really means you got to look at the culture and the beliefs of the people within the organization. Do they really value the integrity of what a peer worker does? Because often they used to get confused with, well, we're going to hire some peers so they can drive the vans or supervise the urine testing. Now, that's not the role of a peer. That's not what we have expertise in. We come to the table because we have lived experience, so we know what our addiction experience was like. But more importantly, this peer knows what it was like in early recovery. They know how to overcome some challenges. They know, they were engaged in the child welfare system or with law enforcement before, and they've been successful. So that's why I think really working on the culture of the organization and then integrating peers or partnering with an organization that employs peers, that because they come from that culture, they get the supervision already, they get the, everything that they need from that organization. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. I know we have a couple in the chat. One from Tennessee. They say we have several DEC coordinators on from Tennessee, and they're looking all familiar because we just trained a lot of them. So it's awesome that you guys are on. The question is there an affiliate in the state of Tennessee? And if not, can we reach out to you, Patty, to develop one? I know Tennessee has been really great with integrating all sorts of different disciplines. So I think that's a great question.
It is a really great question. And I know it's been a challenge because I think we knew of an organization in Tennessee, but it's not strong. I mean, in terms of a well-established RCO in Tennessee. I actually am looking at our map. I went to our website because there's an ARCO map, which shows where all the RCOs are. So I believe there are recovery community organizations that are led and run by people in recovery. They're doing advocacy, they're doing training, they're doing support. They're not currently a member of ARCO, but what we do is we provide them with a lot of capacity building and assistance, like a weekly executive director support group, which we launched at the beginning of COVID, because all these organizations were like, how do we reach our people? But they're the boots on the ground. How do they get into the streets? How do they connect with people? So we launched this executive director support group, and it's going really strong even after COVID. But anyway, there's lots of benefits for connecting with us to help establish that, and even do some grassroots, connecting, and to help people know what they can do, what the potential is for. But there's lots around it. There's a lot of RCOs in North Carolina, in other states surrounding there. So good, you get some good examples, good models around that area.
Is your info email the best way for someone to follow up if they had more specific questions on that?
Well, actually, when you go to the contact us page on the website, it says ARCO, and that person that will get the email on that is one of my staff that manages the RCO program. So they would get, but info would get to us as well.
Okay, thank you.
We also have an RCO toolkit, by the way. So it's like a blueprint, and it's available on the website. It's basically how to start an RCO. But we're working in rural Indiana right now to help a community that has very much rural issues and not a lot of organizing power, to help get an organization started there. So yeah, I suggest just reaching out to us, and we could see what we know about your area.
Perfect. I love that. And I can guarantee you that Tennessee has probably already pulled that email up and is emailing right now. So that's great. And hopefully others will do the same thing as well. Just looking, if there's not something in your state, reaching out to Patty or the folks at Faces and Voices of Recovery to do that. Because I do think there's a lot of benefit to connecting some of the DEC efforts, all of the DEC efforts, with the recovery efforts, because I hate to see them on separate paths because there's so much crossover. And I love what you said, Patty, about, and I wrote it down, children are the biggest winners when adults are in recovery. And I love that. And I'm going to steal that from you. I quoted it on our Facebook during when you were speaking, because that's a really good reminder that this is not just a child issue or an adult issue. It's a family issue, and we really have to approach it in all different aspects and ways. So I love that. One of the questions that came in was, what are some additional ideas that you might have to get people with lived experience more integrated into local efforts and local DEC efforts specifically?
Sure. Well, I talked about coming from a prevention background, and you may be familiar with the Drug-Free Communities Program model, which means that when they get grants for these coalitions, there's a required sectors that are participating on those coalitions, right? And I've always talked with the leadership, there at CADCA and ONDCP to say, why isn't there a required sector of a person with lived experience on that? So if you have a DEC coalition, a DEC alliance where you are missing that voice of somebody who's been through, has direct related experience, then that's the first step but I also caution you to think of one person. We've always had kind of this guiding principle of that's kind of tokenizing. Make sure you get a couple people, that could support one another. They can prepare for the meetings. They can understand, get some background and orientation to be able to participate meaningfully. That it's not just, oh, we have somebody with lived experience, we can check that box. That it's really important to help train them, which is why, we'd love to talk with them. We'd love to help you find someone, but because we help to support them in like how to talk, use appropriate language. We do a lot of work to try to eliminate things like the word addict from our vocabulary. It's stigmatizing and it's not person first language. So a lot of our training is about that. Also just other language, clean and dirty, that type of language that you might hear in especially with drug testing and things like that. So that's part of our training. But I would hope that the folks that get with lived experience that do get involved have an opportunity to learn some of that so they can model appropriate behavior, appropriate language. It's not uncommon, and we're not the word police, but we do say, if somebody all they've ever known is their NA group, and in NA we say I'm an addict. That's okay. That's the culture within that NA group. We're not there to change that, but we would like to train people that when they are in a position of public speaking or being on a committee or something, that the better they can role model positive language, the better we can eliminate stigma. Because we don't need to work with people who are involved with, child welfare or law enforcement by continually perpetuating the stigma by calling people addicts. So that's just one of the ways that I think that we could have people with lived experience involved with your local DEC efforts.
I think that's great. Do you offer training or technical assistance to help people with those conversations within their communities around stigma and breaking down some of those barriers?
Absolutely. We have a training, it's a 1-hour webinar, but we can also do it as a learning community. We can also do it so the basic training is words matter, stigma and language. And it walks through kind of what stigma does to people. The hardest thing, especially with the complexity and intersectionality with, everything from, people of color and criminal justice and, mothers, who are the most stigmatized when they have a substance use disorder, because of the fact that they're a woman and they're a parent, is probably the one thing that we focus on a lot during these trainings is how to help people understand that their label, the labels that we put on people are really what self-perpetuates that stigma, that self-stigma. And once people become healthy and they're getting well, they start to really we can help them empower themselves and the people the peers that they're working with. And they can play a role in educating systems, coming to a court conference or something and telling their story, you know, just by doing that. So yes, we do have some training, and we also have a full day Our Stories Have Power message training. So there's a couple varieties there.
Well, thank you for that. We're definitely pushing across the nation with all of our drug endangered children efforts, whether it's state, local, or tribal efforts, to really encourage people to take a look and start talking about changing the language and what does that look like for people, and how do we do that within communities. And so I think hearing that from your agency and from your perspective, I think would be really a great avenue for folks to integrate that into some of their DEC efforts. It's an important conversation because you're right, we do have to change that, and it starts with all of us right here getting educated and making it a priority so people can get the help that they need and to stay in recovery and to be in recovery. And I just think it's going to be it's an important conversation around our table, and we're definitely talking about it anytime we're in communities and really encouraging people to focus part of their efforts on that. I think it's going to be important moving forward. It's part of the strategy and the solution in some of this. Any other questions for Patty?
I had one other question about the adjunct faculty. How could someone join your team or learn more information about that?
Oh, that would be great. We are always looking for new expertise, because we do have opportunities within state contracts in different states right now, even if it's a new training that we haven't thought of or they're requesting. So bringing your expertise to us could be super helpful and mutually beneficial. But on our website, there's a section called NRI, or the Contact Us form on our website. It has a place where it's a drop-down menu and you say training, and you just contact the training team and say, I'm interested in becoming an adjunct faculty. But there is a section on our website that shows a lot of our current adjunct faculty and what they do and gives a bio for each of them. But I think we have about 25 right now, but we're always busy and we could use new trainers. So let us know.
Perfect. I'm putting that link to your website in the chat there with the adjunct faculty.
Thank you.
Carrie, you're amazing at putting all those links in. I appreciate it.
I hope they're the right ones.
Everything you've said, Patty, there's like a link to it. So Carrie's like on top of it. So any other questions for Patty or for any of our staff at National DEC? Comments, questions are fine. Carrie, are we doing an evaluation for this? Do we need to throw that in the link or do?
Nope, we're not on this one.
Okay, perfect. You guys are off the hook for an evaluation, which is always great. You'll have a couple extra free minutes in your day today. Any other questions? I think we got to the ones that were sent to us. Any other comments, Patty, from you or anything that you want to share that maybe you missed? We just have a couple minutes left.
I really can't think of anything other than just to say that, I mean, this is a huge time in our country for making it, like, talking to policymakers and about the needs in your community. So the more you can educate others, the people that receive services, and give them a voice, have them connect with faces and voices, that's how we build this movement. So thank you all for the work that you do.
Well, thank you, Patty. We appreciate you coming today and sharing the wonderful work you guys are doing across the country. And I'm hoping that this starts the conversation within our DEC community across the nation about how can you integrate recovery efforts into your DEC efforts as well. So please feel free to reach out to Patty or reach out to National DEC staff at info@nationaldec.org anytime, and we can connect you with Patty or other folks. And we just want to say thank you to everybody for joining, and Patty, thank you for providing lots of great information. So I think you're going to get a lot of emails after this, which is good. It's the start of the conversation. So with that being said, we will tell everybody thank you and goodbye, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.